left the farm accompanied by a woman and a child. As he arrived at the dome, he had no idea he was being watched.
I was controlling the cameras inside and outside. We identified Wenham walking around the dome.
Wenham was filmed checking possible access points to the site. Once inside the dome, surveillance officers dressed as tourists got within 10 yards of their target. Totally unaware of their presence, Wenham was filmed visiting the diamond vault no fewer than 3 times.
The alarm bell started to ring because we then had a boat in the farm. We had the dome, which was near a waterborne escape route, and we saw that Wenham did in fact appear to have more than passing interest in the vault like a tourist. We knew therefore what the target was, and we could start planning a response around that.
The plan to foil the raid became known as Operation Magician, the biggest undertaking in the flying squad's history. But circumstantial evidence would not be enough. To ensure convictions, John Shatford would have to catch the gang in the very act of robbing the jewels.
Now, I've had armed robbers that have been dressed up in masks, been carrying guns, and actually still got off at the trial because they've been able to convince the jury that they were there for another purpose. So you actually let the robbers go so far and then arrest them so that their intentions are actually irrefutable.
To catch the gang red-handed, the flying squad needed to find out when the diamonds would be at their most vulnerable. And to do this, they would have to inform the diamonds' owners about the robbery plot.
I was sitting in my office when the phone rang, and it was a policeman on the end there who didn't really introduce himself very clearly, but he'd like to speak to me. And I was met, and he said to me, "We have reasons to believe that there are a bunch of villains who are coming together who are going to try to steal the Millennium Star."
Thorne was initially sceptical. The Millennium Collection was housed in an impregnable vault.
We had built there a fort, literally, of solid concrete, solid doors that nobody could break into. But having said that, the doors had to be open for the general public. And that is why the display cabinets themselves, that glass was supposed to be unbreakable, that it would stand up to at least a half an hour of any demented person who was prepared to smash away with any known device.
Shatford agreed that a raid on the vault was unlikely. He expected the robbery to occur when the diamond was in transit.
Looking at what happened at Nine Elms, looking what happened at Aylesford, we're pretty certain that they must be going to rob the diamond when it's en route somewhere. And talking to Tim, he said, well, actually, it's going to be moved to Tokyo on display.
In early September, the diamonds were due to be driven from the dome to De Beers' London headquarters before being taken to an exhibition in Japan.
Suddenly, that was it. Well, if this is the only time it's being moved, the gang must have inside information from somewhere, and they must be going to hit this on the 1st of September.
The flying squad now scrambled to put together the biggest ambush in their history. John Shatford decided on overwhelming force in his quest to catch the diamond raiders in the act.
We had the entire river covered with our river launches, and I must have had close to 300 people at the end of the day, either dug in around the dome or watching. We're putting people up at cranes around the dome, so we had absolutely everywhere covered. We were actually ready for a war, quite frankly. We could take on anything.
At dawn on the 1st, security staff removed the priceless diamonds from the dome's vault. Replicas were then displayed in their place. At 6 a.m, the armoured convoys set off.
We got word that the security vehicles are now going to move away, and they're on their way. So I had a helicopter in the air, standing off at distance, and we were waiting, well, where's it going to happen?
John Shatford had identified the Blackwall Tunnel, which connects the Dome to the City of London on the north side of the Thames, as the most likely place for the gang to strike. As the security van entered the tunnel, the police held their breath.
We waited and we waited. And we followed that all the way back to De Beers headquarters in the City of London. Nothing happened. And when it arrived in those gates and I got the message back to where I was at the Dome, that's it. It's back, safe, no untoward incident. I just went away in a corner and I thought, what's happened?
The police operation had cost hundreds of thousands of pounds. The gang had simply not shown up.
And I went back to Scotland Yard and I went and shut myself in my office and I just sunk my head in their hands and I thought, what the hell? You know, how else can they possibly do it? They absolutely could not do it inside the Dome. They just couldn't possibly do that. Perhaps it's never going to happen. And that was probably the lowest ebb.
But just as Operation Magician teetered on the brink of disaster, Shatford received some stunning news. It came from the undercover officer who was manning the Dome's security cameras.
I've got a call from Sean Allen, who said something like, "Boss, you're not going to believe this, but I just spotted Betson and Cochrane at the Dome. And they're having a good eyeball at the Diamond."
You could see Ray Betson and William Cochrane walking round the Dome. And I was euphoric because we had actually seen them still there. So for us, the job was still on.
The gang appeared unaware that the real diamonds had left the country and that the stones in the vault were mere replicas.
We were more confident that they did not have an inside agent because otherwise they would have known that these diamonds would have moved at that time.
And he's talking me through it, he's telling me what's happened, and I could feel myself lifting and thinking, my God, it's still on. And not only that, it's still on, but Christ, this can only mean they're going to do it inside the Dome.
By the autumn of 2000, police knew the gang they were tailing were planning to snatch the priceless De Beers diamond collection from inside the Millennium Dome. In order to catch the robbers in the act, the flying squad needed to set up what was clearly a risky armed ambush in a very public place. But such an audacious plan was not what the man in charge of the Dome wanted to hear.
I was not a happy bunny at all, and I was not ready to cooperate, and I very openly said, you know, I'm going to stop you. I'm going to do everything in my power to stop you do this, you know, because I don't care. This is my world, this is my tent, these are my people. You know, it could have been the biggest bloodbath ever.
Then, of course, we have to put another perspective on that and say, well, look, hang on. This gang is very, very dangerous. We now have an opportunity to arrest them in a properly controlled environment with irrefutable evidence. Now, if we fail on this occasion, how can you explain? Well, we actually did have an opportunity to arrest this team and put them out the way, but it was too dangerous, so we didn't do it. We're the police. There is no one else.
And this guy really kind of, you know, let me blow smoke and just calm me down and just turn me around and convince me this is going to be good. This is going to be all right.
As senior officers gained clearance for their armed ambush, undercover colleagues kept their targets under surveillance. And that would soon unmask a fifth member of the gang. This police footage shows Betson and Cochrane in a Bermondsey car park meeting a man later identified as 29-year-old Aldo Chierocci. Chierocci, a failed property developer with a taste for the finer things in life, seemed an unlikely armed robber.
I don't know if he came over as a playboy. He certainly was not of the same robber ilk as the rest of them. More educated, and he would have been the odd one out in the pack, but he had a role to play as well.
With 5 of the gang identified, the police now concentrated their surveillance on the getaway vehicle.
Because we knew the robbery would involve a boat, for that reason, if we stayed with the boat, we would get the ultimate target. We could never be 100% sure that they weren't planning a secondary target, maybe to move on to. So for that reason, to minimise the risk of compromising the operation, we played it safe and we stayed on the boat.
As the robbers tested the speedboat, the watching police noticed it was not performing as it should. On the 3rd of October, officers followed Terence Millman to a boatyard in Whitstable, Kent.
Contact. He's got glasses, beard, horizontal striped jumper.
There he paid £2,000 cash for a replacement boat.
Reversing towards the gates of the boatyard.
The boat is being manoeuvred towards the back of the transit.
When police recovered the receipt, they found that it signed for the purchase using the name Terry Diamond. But while detectives were sure the boat would be used for the getaway, they were baffled by the other unusual vehicle they'd seen the gang testing. The yellow JCB.
We identified that the robbery gang would use a JCB in some part of this robbery. We did not have any idea what they would use it for.
But officers were confident that the date of the raid was drawing near. The gang's activity was increasing, and on October the 6th, the JCB was tailed from Tong Farm to a derelict coal yard in Plumstead, South London.
Contact, the JCB.
This secluded place, just a few miles from the Dome, was to become the forward operations post for the gang. And with the real diamonds back at the Dome after the Japanese tour, the stakes could not be higher.
There's this general air that we must be getting close to the robbery taking place. The gang carried out some form of work on it. There was a lot of banging, I think some welding. We didn't know what was taking place, and indeed we did not know what this was being used for. It was a mystery throughout. What on earth are they going to do?
Not knowing how or when the gang would strike presented the police with huge logistical problems. They had to keep an expensive 24-hour presence in and around the Dome, while all the time keeping it secret from the gang.
We used cover stories that we were doing a training exercise in the local area. Our main concern was that the robbers, for want of a better word, would start putting the Dome into the too hard box and would start looking for a softer target that they could control better.
As the secret stakeout at the Millennium Dome continued, surveillance officers began to notice new patterns in the gang's visits. As autumn progressed, they only seemed to turn up at certain times on certain days.
The gang had been to the Dome on a number of occasions, and we were starting to look at this and the dates that were involved. And then it turned out that every time they were there coincided with when the Thames was at a high tide.
We had a survey done of the river by a Thames branch who actually indicated to us that there was only so many spots along the Thames where a boat could be put in or taken out of, and there was only about a 30-minute window of opportunity on every tide.
We could then look on the calendar and follow the same date, so whenever it was a high tide, I could deploy and in strength.
The next high tide was due at 9:30 a.m. on Monday, November the 6th. At this time of day, the Dome and its diamond vault would be open to the public. As Shatford prepared his men, he knew that any mistakes would have far-reaching consequences.
If we got this wrong, we're talking here, the reputation of the Metropolitan Police, maybe its ability ever to carry on and tackle crime in